Rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day.
Many of you will celebrate this Christmas season by partaking in traditions that have been passed along from generation to generation. Charles Dickens' famous novel, A Christmas Carol, has become one of those traditions, read around the fire, watched on the stage, or enjoyed in its varied movie renditions. Whether it's from the Muppets or Mickey, the miserly Scrooge, whose heart is warmed by a ghostly visit, has made his way into our hearts and the very fabric of the Christmas season. Join us for this Christmas special produced by Lutheran Ministries, inspired by Dickens' Christmas classic. Walk with us in the shoes of this modern-day Scrooge as a work assignment proves to be transforming, much like the story of Scrooge. Let your heart listen and look inside. Perhaps you'll hear a bit of your story in this story. Enjoy. Assignment Christmas.
December 25th, 1842, was a Sunday in London, England. It was a gray, drab day like any other winter day. Walking the streets, you may have heard church bells, but you would have hardly even known it was anything other than a remarkably mild day for early winter. A year later, December 25th, 1843, everything in the city would tell a much different story. It was Christmas Day, and the city was alive with the spirit of the season. What changed? One thing. A man named Charles Dickens wrote a book called A Christmas Carol.
Great delivery, boss. You auditioning for the community theater again?
No, Edie. I'm pitching you your next assignment.
Oh, excellent. I'm ready. What's it about?
What do you mean, what is it about? A Christmas Carol. You know, 3 ghosts, Tiny Tim, how one night can change a person's life. That story almost single-handedly invented the sights, sounds, and traditions we now know as Christmas. Isn't that fascinating? And I already gave you a great hook. I hope you were taking notes.
Wait, Christmas? It's been a while, boss. That's not exactly my cup of tea anymore.
I know it isn't. And I know you think of these things as puff pieces. But this is what our readers want, especially right now.
But couldn't you give it to Andy? He loves this kind of sappy stuff.
Despite your feelings about it, this is actually an important article for our paper. Stories of hope are what generate new clicks and new subscribers. I only trust you with it.
Fine, copy that. You got any tips? For a Grinch like me, that is.
Well, you could start by reading the book.
The whole thing? Isn't it like hundreds of pages?
If you'd prefer a hard copy, I think there's one in the library. Oh, and I have an expert you can interview, Dr. Fan at Imperial College. I'll forward you his contact info.
Oh, great. A stuffy professor. Just the kind of person to get me into the Christmas spirit.
I realize this isn't the career-defining project you were hoping for, but we can talk about that in the new year. Until then, just don't let me down, Edie Savers.
Have I ever before? I won't start now, boss. Challenge accepted.
And deadline's in a week. Think you can handle that?
You know what they say, no rest for the weary, especially in the news business.
Then what are you doing still standing here?
Valid observation. Here we go. Dr. Fan at Imperial College. It says he's a Rhodes Scholar who specializes in the works of Charles Dickens. Wow, that's actually halfway impressive. Dickens wrote the book in October 1843, at a time when he was in financial straits and in dire need of something to re-engage his fledgling audience of readers. Sounds like our newspaper. He wrote it in just 6 weeks. That is fast, I'll give him that. But his publisher was skeptical. So Dickens published A Christmas Carol with his own money, even paying extra to have the book bound in red cloth with gold gilded edges on the pages. That's sort of cool, given that he didn't have much to spare. The book was an immediate bestseller, but not an instant classic. That didn't happen until Dickens started hosting public readings on stage. He structured the chapters as staves or stanzas, as if the story itself was meant to be sung like a carol. Huh, I never knew any of that. At least the history is somewhat interesting. Maybe this won't be such a slog to get through after all. Better start reading. No rest for the weary. Not even the merry kind.
Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. Marley's ghost walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped. Not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few, they might be guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant, whom it saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere, for good, in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say, "Humbug," but stopped at the first syllable. And being, from the emotions he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation with the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant.
Sorry, Edie. Just checking in. Didn't mean to startle you.
It's not you. It's this book. It's actually kind of scary.
Well, yeah. It is a ghost story after all.
Right. It's about the past, memories, nostalgia.
Yes, nostalgia. That's the tie-in to today's audience. That's the theme.
Maybe.
Of course. Think about it. All the Christmas ads and traditions, the decorations in our homes, beckons us back to memories of childhood, to nostalgia, to the loved ones from a history long ago.
But those memories, as joyful as they may be, can sometimes gloss over shackles of regret or misery. Something like that?
Whoa, sounds pretty dark.
I guess, but also pretty powerful. I mean, at the beginning, a caroler sings outside Scrooge's office that Christmas comes to save us all from the chains of Satan's power when we were gone astray.
I don't know, Edie. Let's stick with the nostalgia angle.
There's a funny thing about nostalgia. At Christmas time, it often invokes warm feelings of family and favorite gifts. But in the quieter moments, it can also invoke pain or regret. We forget that the word nostalgia was first coined by a Swiss medical student in the year 1688 to describe a disease he saw amongst soldiers in war. They suffered from such a severe homesickness that it bordered on paranoia. Not quite the nostalgia of aluminum Christmas trees or grandma's oven-baked ham. But maybe this is why, when the ghost of Christmas past takes Ebenezer Scrooge on a trip down memory lane, the spirit shows him memories that almost feel new. Ebenezer became Scrooge because he purposefully forgot all these memories, good and bad, mainly because of the pain they brought him. An unloving father, a sister who died too young, a love lost. Hello? I'm sorry, who? Oh no, he's not at this number. Can you put me on the do not call list, please? Thanks. Who's there?
Relax, Edie. It's just me. You seem on edge.
It is not you, Bo. You are not there. You're just in my head.
If you say so.
I go days without thinking about you. Weeks, even. Then a stupid telemarketer messes everything up.
What you working on? New story? Ah, Christmas. Your favorite subject.
Bo, please.
Must be a tight deadline, because you're here late. Everyone else has left for the day in case you hadn't noticed.
No sense in rushing home to eat dinner alone.
Oh, is that supposed to make me feel guilty? You're the one who chose your job over our relationship, remember?
No, that's not how I remember it. I'm on a path, Bo. I didn't exactly have a choice, did I?
Of course you did. You always have a choice.
Is that why you're here? To rub salt in the wound?
I noticed you liked one of my Instagram posts the other day.
Here we go. More salt. Yes, your wedding looked lovely, okay? I couldn't help myself.
It was lovely. In fact, it was perfect. And that could have been us.
I don't know. I'm not sure we were compatible.
We were a match made in heaven, Edie, and you know it. We could have been happy. Really happy.
Get out of my head. Please, get out of my head.
"Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you these were the shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "That they are what they are, do not blame me." "Remove me!" Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which in some strange way there were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it. "Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer!" In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
What? What time is it? I fell asleep at the office? Oh well, no reason to commute when there's a deadline looming. Now, where was I? Ah, right. Our past and the memories we make of it can be what? What does the ghost of Christmas past say? That they are what they are. Do not blame me. Oof, that's brutal. Okay, so maybe something like our past and the memories we make of it can be a light that illuminates how we came to be who we are. And when Scrooge looks into the ghost's face to see all the fragments of all the faces of his past, it's almost like he's looking into a mirror. We are who we are because of who we've come from. Okay, but then what? How are we supposed to deal with it? Bo, please, get out of my head! One way to deal with that is to try to forget about it.
Let's stick with the nostalgia angle.
Another way is to wrap it up in fancy paper and wax nostalgic about it. We need a third way, a healthy way, the right way. Oh, it's from Dr. Fan.
Dear Miss Saver, thank you for reaching out and for your thoughtful questions. While many insights into A Christmas Carol can be gleaned from your internet research, I'd like to offer you a lesser-known anecdote. 5 years after Charles Dickens wrote it, he penned his fifth and final Christmas book with a story entitled The Haunted Man. It bears striking parallels to the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, but also with the life story of Dickens himself. That year, 1848, Charles Dickens lost his beloved sister to death. Likewise, the main character of The Haunted Man, Stephen Redlaw, is an old man overcome with the grief of his own sister's death. And like Scrooge, he's visited by a ghost. But unlike Scrooge, Redlaw is known for his life of goodness and compassion, and yet he still suffers from sadness and despair. So the ghost offers him a bargain. The ghost will erase his painful memories, and going forward, any person Redlaw touches will also lose their painful memories. What first seems a blessing quickly becomes a curse. The curse is broken only when Redlaw encounters his cook, Millie, who has herself known greater grief, but who reveals to him that it's only through her suffering that she's able to share a deeper care and compassion for others. In both stories, Dickens seems to be conveying a paradox about our past. If we try to ignore or erase the pain of it, we only become more miserable. But if we come to peace with our past, we can discover compassion and kindness and love.
But that still leaves the question, how do we find that peace? Is that why you're here? To rub salt in the wound? Or we can face up to it in all its honesty, its joys, its pains, and everything in between. This is what people like to listen to this time of year. I was hoping it would get me into the spirit to write this thing, but that's a hard no. Hey, sis, what's up?
Oh, hey, are you on the road already?
Yeah, I've got to get to the office and crank out this assignment. I'm on a tight deadline.
Oh, I thought you were free of tight deadlines until after the holidays?
I thought so too, but my boss had other ideas.
Okay. Well, then, I won't keep you. I was just wondering if you were able to find that dollhouse for Hattie for Christmas?
I totally forgot. I've been so wrapped up in this assignment.
Where have I heard that before?
Please, not right now. I have a lot on my plate. I'm only one person. I'll order the dollhouse as soon as I get to work, okay?
You can't order it, Edie. It's an in-store exclusive. And it's probably sold out by now.
Well, that's not my fault. Why don't I get her something else, like a new video game or a year's subscription to whatever streaming channel she likes?
Edie, the fact that she wants an actual toy, something tangible that'll make use of her imagination, is a win in this household. I'm trying to instill less screen time and more playtime.
Okay, fine. I'll figure it out. But I'm at the office now, so I've got to go.
Okay. Bye.
Let's see. Where were we? That's right. The Ghost of Christmas Present. Touch my robe. The Ghost of Christmas Present tells Ebenezer Scrooge after he is awakened by the bell striking 1 in the morning. And with that, the ghost takes Scrooge on a tour of the city of London, dirty with soot and snow-covered mud. But inside each window, Scrooge sees the glowing warmth of rich and poor alike overflowing with the childlike joy and wonder of Christmas. This is where Scrooge encounters the crippled Tiny Tim and the whole family of his underpaid clerk, Bob Cratchit. And the tour ends with a visit to the home of his nephew, the son of his beloved sister. He and his wife are throwing a Christmas party of games and laughter, so cheerful that Scrooge can't help but want to join in.
While there is infection in disease and sorrow, there is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. When Scrooge's nephew laughed in this way, holding his sides, rolling his head, and twisting his face into the most extravagant contortions, Scrooge's niece, by marriage, laughed as heartily as he. And their assembled friends, being not a bit behindhand, roared out lustily. "He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live!" cried Scrooge's nephew. "He believed it, too!" "More shame for him, Fred," said Scrooge's niece indignantly. "He's a comical old fellow," said Scrooge's nephew. "That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be." "I have no patience with him," observed Scrooge's niece. "I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him if he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, 'Uncle Scrooge, how are you?'" After tea, they had some music. When this strain of music sounded, all the things that ghost had shown Scrooge came upon his mind. He softened more and more, and thought that if he could have listened to it often, years ago, he might have cultivated the kindnesses of life for his own happiness with his own hands, without resorting to the sexton's spade that buried Jacob Marley. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while, they played at forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting in the interest he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears, he sometimes came out with his guess quite loud, and very often guessed quite right, too. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favour that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guests departed. But this, the spirit said, could not be done. "It is a new game," said Scrooge. "1 half-hour, spirit, only one." It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what, he only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case was. The brisk fire of questioning to which he was exposed elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, rather a disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London. At every fresh question that was put to him, this nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last, the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, "It's your Uncle Scrooge!" Which it certainly was. "Here's a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, 'Uncle Scrooge, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is,'" said Scrooge's nephew. Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return and thanked them in an inaudible speech if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels.
For it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. Even Dickens mentions the Christ child in his version of Christmas. It feels like that's what's missing here. He came as a child, a baby. No jaded expectations, not trying to get ahead while he had the chance. No greed, no ill motives, but innocence, humility, love. Where did that get lost? Why does that get lost? When did Christmas become just another day? Again? I told her I'm on a deadline. Hey, sis, this really isn't a good time.
Hi, Aunt Edie.
Oh, Hattie. Hey, sweetheart. Did you take your mom's phone again?
Yeah, she doesn't care. She's too busy decorating the house.
Uh-huh. And you figured out FaceTime again?
Aunt Edie, I've always known how to use FaceTime.
Oh, that's right. You came out of the womb with a smartphone in your hand.
What?
Nothing. Never mind. Listen, kiddo, I've got to get back to work.
Mom says you're always working.
Well, not everything your mom says is true. Besides, don't you have homework to do?
No, silly. It's Christmas break.
Oh, you're lucky. Grown-ups don't always get a break at Christmas.
But you're coming to our house on Christmas, right? That's why I called.
Oh, well, I don't think I'll be able to make it, honey. Aunt Edie is on a deadline for one assignment, and then I've got to jump right into the next assignment.
A deadline?
It's like when you have a project at school and it's due to be turned in on a certain day. Well, I have to write a whole article in just a few short days, and then another article after that.
Oh, okay. But what happens if you don't?
That's not really an option, babe. I could lose my job.
So your job is more important than us?
No, of course not.
Sort of seems like it, though.
Hattie, that is not what I said.
But you used to hang out with us all the time, and now we never see you, or Bo.
Honey, Bo and I broke up a long time ago. You know that.
Yeah, and that was your fault, too.
Hey, settle down, young lady. Sounds like someone could use a snack.
You used to be fun, Aunt Edie. Now you're just mean.
Hattie, don't say that.
I hate you.
Edie,
Oh, good morning.
how was your night?
Not great, actually. My 10-year-old niece yelled at me over FaceTime.
You know kids. They get over things. How was the writing going?
Good, I think. I just got to the part in the book about the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Yuck, I hate that part. We want this to be light and bright and joyful. Nostalgia, remember? Not regret.
Right.
Still good with tomorrow's deadline?
Absolutely.
I'll leave you to it then.
As the ghost of Christmas present disappears, Ebenezer Scrooge trembles at the approach of the frightful ghost of Christmas yet to come. The spirit takes him to a series of places, all of them wrapped up with the death of an unnamed man, and it would seem Scrooge himself is the only human being who does not know who the deceased is. But despite every question Scrooge asks about the man and his identity, the ghost will not say one word or make any gesture, yea or nay, until we get to the place Scrooge dreads the most.
A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man, whose name he had now to learn, lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. "Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of the things that may be only?" Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead," said Scrooge. "But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me." The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and, following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "Am I the man who lay upon the bed?" he cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. "No, spirit! Oh, no, no!" The finger was still there. "Spirit!" he cried, tight clutching at its robe. "Hear me! Hear me! I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope?" For the first time the hand appeared to shake. "Good spirit, he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees.
Boss, you wanted to see me?
Edie, come in. Close the door behind you. Have a seat.
Did you get a chance to take a look at my article?
Did I ever? This part here, Marley was dead to begin with, is how Charles Dickens begins his story. At the end, Scrooge is just as dead. When Scrooge first encounters this silent ghost of Christmas yet to come, he confesses with fear and trembling, I hope to live to be another man from what I was. Truer words were never spoken. What the ghost of Christmas past called a reclamation actually turned out to be a resurrection?
Oh, yeah. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I love that part. Gives me chills. What do you think?
I think this has nothing to do with nostalgia, Edie. This is not the direction I thought you were going to go.
Oh, I've still got the nostalgia stuff in there.
But it's not the theme.
No, you're right. It's not the theme. Because A Christmas Carol is about so much more than nostalgia. Christmas is about so much more. In the story, Scrooge becomes a new man. He doesn't just get a little makeover or go in another direction, but he is a changed person. It happens to him. And that transformation leads him to a more generous life. Did you read the next paragraph?
No, I'm afraid to. But here goes. To paraphrase the words of the Apostle Paul in his second letter to the Corinthians, here is a new creation. The old man Scrooge has passed away, and behold, everything has become new, even Ebenezer Scrooge. And all that is left of him is the sheer childlike joy that is the true miracle of Christmas, that the Christ child has come into this world of ours to take upon himself our old, miserable, miserly selves and give back to us his new life, overflowing with peace and hope and joy.
See? That's the theme. On the surface, it's a ghost story, sure. But at its heart, it's a story about transformation. About how a person can be unchained from his greed and self-absorption and opened up to the joy of a life shared with others. At the end, Dickens writes that Scrooge, and I quote, became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. Or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world.
Have you memorized the book already?
Well, to be fair, that is one of the most famous lines.
Edie, I'm not sure about mentioning the Christ child.
How come? That's the true meaning of Christmas.
But not everyone who reads this will be a Christian.
That's even better. Everyone should have the opportunity to read about Jesus.
Let me think about it.
We go to press in a few hours. I won't have time to rewrite.
I said let me think about it.
Sure thing, boss. Ooh, my favorite. Hey, sis.
Edie, I just read it. I'm so proud of you.
Read it? Read what?
Your article. I got an alert when it was posted to your paper's website, and I immediately sat down to read it.
Oh, wow. That's so sweet. Thank you.
I never thought I'd see the day you wrote about Christmas.
You and me both, sister. But to be honest, it's helped me see where I've fallen short.
Really?
Yeah, and how I can do better.
Well, you're not the only one, Edie. We can all do better, one way or another. But we're not expected to do it alone. We can ask each other for help, and we can come to God in prayer.
You know I'm not great at either of those things.
I do know, which is why I've been praying for you. The whole family has, including Hattie.
She has? But I thought she hated me.
She could never hate you, Edie. You're her favorite aunt. Anyway, I think your article is brilliant and so moving. The connection you make between Scrooge's redemption and how we are redeemed through Jesus Christ, how God became a human in order to transform us. It's inspired.
That's all still in there?
Well, yeah. Why wouldn't it be? It's the true meaning of Christmas.
You're right. It is.
Edie? What are you doing here?
Merry Christmas, sis.
Merry Christmas to you too. But I thought you had to work today?
It's like I told you. Writing that article helped me see how I can do better. And God opened my eyes to what's really important. Celebrating Jesus' birthday with you guys is at the top of the list.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that. But there's someone else who will be even happier.
I don't know. As you can see, I come empty-handed. You were right. The dollhouse was sold out.
Edie, you mean so much more to her than some dollhouse. Hattie, look who's here.
Aunt Edie!
Edie was transformed. God was the author of it, and Charles Dickens' classic text was a line that God used to write her story into his son's. Thank you for joining us in this Lutheran Hour Christmas special. I'm Pastor Michael Ziegler, speaker of the Lutheran Hour, and I'm here with Reverend Dr. Travis Scholl. Travis helped develop the concept behind this drama you just heard by providing some of the background research and theological, biblical insights that we can find in the text. So welcome, Dr. Scholl. Travis, thanks for being here. Thanks for your work, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. It's good to be here. And you're right, Edie was transformed by being reintroduced to this classic story, A Christmas Carol, because Dickens' story is an occasion for her to be introduced again to the Christ child, to Jesus, and what he means for us.
Our interest for this project grew out of a Bible study that you had put together several years ago. It's titled Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, a 4-week Bible study for Advent, so the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. And we'll put a link to that on our Lutheran Hour website. Travis, clearly, A Christmas Carol has been a long-standing interest of yours. Do you have a favorite on-screen adaptation of it?
Well, I can't say I've seen them all because there's well over 100 just film adaptations of A Christmas Carol. But the one that is really always in my mind is the one I saw, I think I was in junior high, when the version with George C. Scott playing Scrooge came out as a made-for-TV movie. And so I always, whenever I visualize Scrooge, I always see the face of George C. Scott with those big mutton chops, sideburns. And so I can't help myself. How about you?
It was the Mickey Mouse version for me, one that came out in the 80s with, of course, Scrooge McDuck was Scrooge and Mickey Mouse with Bob Cratchit. And you, as you're listening, I'm sure that you have a favorite movie or animated version that first introduced you to Dickens' Christmas Carol. And maybe you're like me. When I first started talking with Travis about this several months ago, I was thinking to myself, I've never actually read the original. So we would like to encourage you to do that. If you've never had a chance to read it or listen to it on an audiobook, we want to encourage you to do that and see how this story, this classic story, might draw you closer to Jesus, just as it did for Edie in the drama. What kind of reclamation, resurrection work God might do in you.
And to help towards that, I think there's 3 different ways that we can read or listen to the story of Dickens' Christmas Carol.
Yeah, not ways to read in the sense of audiobook or ebook or gilded cloth-bound book, but maybe a good word is postures.
Yeah, our position towards it, or what's going on, the internal conversation we have in our head as we're encountering this story.
Yeah, and if you're having a conversation with someone, you could have more of like a arms crossed, furrowed brow, critical posture. We could maybe call that the humbug posture.
Or we could have more of a open arms posture of leaning in to listen to somebody, and we could call that the Tiny Tim posture.
God bless us, everyone.
Right.
And then maybe the last one is like the celebratory Mr. Old Fezziwig posture. So we'll talk about those, but let's start with this first one, the humbug posture. And you said you were going to look this word up for me. Did Dickens coin the term humbug?
You know, I actually thought he did, but then I looked into it here recently, and actually the word started somewhere about 100 years before Dickens made it famous in this story, sometime in the 1750s. And it came to be a term that was used to call out anything that would be perceived to be a fraud or deception or nonsense. It's not unlike a term that someone might use today, but that term we can't say on the air.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean there. Yeah. So humbug posture would be critical, doubtful, sometimes maybe a posture of unbelief. And this isn't necessarily bad. We're not saying this is all bad. The Bible tells us in 1 John chapter 4, do not believe every spirit. It tells us to test the spirits to see whether they really are from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. So as Christians, we don't trust every spirit. Sometimes we should say humbug.
That's right. That's right. When Scrooge encounters Marley's ghost, he thinks he has an indigestion, some undigested beef in his belly. And so it's kind of like that. When we have that sort of a situation, saying humbug may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, and for us as Christians, we say humbug to anything that's going to lead us away from Jesus Christ. So Travis, when you listen or read a Christmas carol, where are you most likely to say humbug?
Well, this goes back to when I first wrote the Bible study, and it was a challenge I had because Dickens himself wasn't necessarily a devout or Orthodox Christian. He believed in God, but was kind of what we might call a deist. And so it's not an explicitly Christian story, even though it's about the most famous holiday that Christians celebrate. And so I had to come to terms with, how do I read this as a Christian would? And there's obviously some things in there that wouldn't necessarily align.
Right. Yeah, it's a morality tale. It's not about worshiping the Son of God in flesh. So I am inclined to say humbug. Maybe I put on my Lutheran pastor hat and think, Scrooge is just trying to save himself by his own good works. And we Lutherans, we can sniff out works righteousness from a mile away. And that's what I see when I put on this more critical posture that at the end, he says he's going to change the future by his improved life, make amends for all his sins of the past by good deeds, and which is good. We want to serve neighbor, but this is not what puts us right with God. And that relationship with God is kind of not even mentioned, completely overlooked. And so I would say humbug to that.
Right.
So we do need to be able to have this critical way of engaging, a critical posture with the story, but we shouldn't stop there. Travis, why shouldn't we stop with criticism?
Well, at Christmas time, when we gather with our families, we probably all could think of maybe that aunt or uncle or cousin who is the Debbie Downer in the room. And everything they say is negative. They're always the pessimist, the cynic. And nobody wants to be the Debbie Downer because that just short circuits the joy of the celebration.
Yeah. Or nobody wants to have dinner with the Debbie Downer. I think of the passage from Philippians chapter 4 where the Apostle Paul says, if there's anything praiseworthy, anything commendable, anything that you can look at and say, yeah, I see the glory of God in that. Even if it's not explicitly Christian, the Psalms say it, that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And so we can see God's goodness everywhere. So humbug shouldn't be the only word that we speak because Christ has come to redeem all things. Like the old hymn says, he He comes to make his blessings flow far as the curse is found.
And that joy is for the whole world. No one is excluded.
Another way of listening to Dickens' Christmas Carol is the Tiny Tim postures. So, Travis, how would you describe the Tiny Tim posture?
God bless us, everyone,
Yeah.
right? The childlike faith, ready to be open with a grateful heart to every good gift that comes to us in this life. And even as Tiny Tim does to bless Mr. Scrooge.
Oh, yeah. That's such a heartwarming moment. He just like, yeah, Dad, let's bless Mr. Scrooge. When you hear or read A Christmas Carol, Travis, with that childlike faith, what's a gift? What's one gift that you find hidden?
This is what I love about the George C. Scott version. When he wakes up on Christmas morning and realizes it was all a dream, this isn't real, I'm not dead. Just the overflowing sort of irresistible joy that comes out of Scrooge in that moment, that gets portrayed on screen, is just, it's my confirmation pastor would always say, it's a get to, not a got to.
Yeah.
And that sort of irresistible joy, he just can't help himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a get to and not something I have to do. It's something I can't help myself.
I really love that, the George C. Scott presentation of that. Later then I watched the newer Disney one with Jim Carrey. That's kind of the CG version, and he's like a little goofy. Like it's as you'd expect Jim Carrey to be. I think he's like playing air guitar or something like that. But George C. Scott does it well. Just amount of that childlike joy that comes from being reborn and being made new.
Yeah, and Dickens, in all of his work, I mean, he has so many famous novels, but one of the through lines is how he depicts children as sort of an ideal of faith and joy and life. That childlike wonder is, and that comes through so clearly in A Christmas Carol as well.
Yeah, but you mentioned that. There's also this very dark and realistic, gritty presentation of how vulnerable children are. I had never known about the children underneath the robe of the Ghost of Christmas Present. None of the cartoon versions have that.
Yep.
Until I read it, and then I saw it depicted in the George C. Scott version, and that's horrifying. But it reflects these two children. What is it?
Ignorance and want.
Ignorance and want, and it's terrifying that how vulnerable children are if not cared for. And so I think what I take from that is part of one of these gifts is that to be a child is to be completely dependent on the care of someone else. And so if we, as Jesus says, to enter into the kingdom of God, you have to become like children, which means to become helpless, to become someone who can't improve themselves, but simply has to wait for another to save them.
It is so true. Dickens played on this in his stories, but it's so true for all of us. We see in children the most beautiful aspects of our lives, but then when we also see the worst of humanity, and it evokes powerful emotions anytime there's an instance of child abuse or children in poverty. And that's even still true for Christmas for us now. You know, my best memories of Christmas are either when I was a child or when my own children were little. You know, my two boys are older now, so Christmas doesn't have that same sort of warmth and tenderness, even though we still have a great time. It's always a great, joyful celebration. But we see so much in children about the best and the worst of life.
Well, it makes me think of the prayer from the Christmas song, Away in the Manger, the simple, childlike, vulnerable prayer of faith, just asking Jesus, Lord Jesus, be near me. I ask thee to stay close by me forever. I need you. I'm a child. Take care of me. Okay, Travis, we've discussed the humbug posture, the Tiny Tim posture. Let's talk about old Fezziwig. So Fezziwig, he's this blend. I see him as a blend of Scrooge. He's industrious, he's productive, he's got a good business, but also Tiny Tim's simple faith. He's sort of both. You remember, Fezziwig is the master that Scrooge apprenticed under. Scrooge respected him because he ran a productive business. So he's a hardworking kind of guy.
Yeah, in that sense, he's, at the risk of oversimplifying, he's Scrooge without the greed. And so, it is kind of cool in the story of how he's able to take his warehouse, his place of business, and just in a few short, quick moments turns it into a dance hall.
Yeah, it's before you can count to 12.
Right.
Dick and Ebenezer, they've already got all the shutters closed.
Yep. And before you know it, he's out there dancing a jig with everybody, with the missus. And instead of humbug, he likes to say, yo-ho there and hilly-ho.
Yeah, hilly-ho. Yeah, so Fezziwig, he's our creative, constructive, maybe you could say contemplative posture. He's not just criticizing, he's not just accepting the gifts as is, but he's using them to make more. Maybe even, you'd say, to make more meaning than the author intended. So, Travis, when you put on your Fezziwig, where does your mind go?
Well, and this is, I was an English major in college. My PhD's in English, so I read a lot of literature. And what's always fun about reading good stories like this is you can make connections that aren't otherwise obvious, and can make it fun, like a dance, right?
Yeah,
like dancing a jig. And so one of the ones that was interesting to me that I'm 99.9% sure Charles Dickens didn't intend, but when Scrooge is with the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, they come to the deathbed of the person who we all know it's Scrooge, right?
Everybody except Scrooge knows
Everybody except Scrooge knows it's Scrooge. But so he gets to the deathbed and the body is shrouded and there's a cloth over the face of the dead person. And Scrooge is completely he wants to pull back the sheet, but he can't. He's incapable of doing that. And so it makes me think out loud a little bit and make a connection that we know it's Scrooge's body, right? But maybe in one sense, it's also Christ's body laying there. And that Christ is here in the story with us in that one moment.
Martin Luther has that phrase of the happy exchange, the beautiful trade, and the image he uses is a marriage. A husband and a bride are joined and wedded together. They take all the bad and all the good together. And if Christ is the bridegroom of the church, he takes our death, he dies in our place, and then gives us his life, his resurrection life in return. You think about the criticism of Scrooge being an example of works righteousness, saving yourself by your own efforts. Maybe with your interpretation, it's not that Scrooge is working for his transformation, but he's working from it. He's working from this new life that's been given to him as a gift, like Edie quotes in the narrative from 2 Corinthians, that if anyone's in Christ, he's a new creation.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And you think about Galatians 2:20 as well, kind of going with your image of Paul says, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. I've been crucified with Christ.
Yeah, and it makes me think, too, of, again, kind of coming full circle, with the humbug posture, short-circuiting joy, that, the passage from Ephesians, that Christ fills all and is in all. And so that frees us to see Jesus everywhere.
Yeah.
Even in this little detail in a story with a shrouded body, that Christ is everywhere. And it's interesting because then after that moment is when Scrooge, we could talk about when was Scrooge really transformed? And that's a cool open question to talk. Was it gradual or was there one month? But really after that moment is where you can really see he's a different person.
Right. It wasn't until he realized that he was dead.
Right.
And in the moment when he's helpless and cannot do anything else, because before he thinks that he can reform himself, and he's even a little puzzled at the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. Like, why are you showing me all this? If I'm reformed, and he keeps expecting to see himself in the future reformed, being a good man, but no, he's dead.
Yep.
And the only way out is resurrection.
Yeah. And then he repeats a sentence that I really love to the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. He says, I will live in the past, the present, and the future, almost as if he's doing it simultaneously. And that's really a great image of what the Christian life is all about, that we live in the past, remembering what has been done for us in Christ. We live in the present moment, loving and serving all of those around us, but then we also live in the certain hope that we know what is yet to come in the future.
Yeah, and this is what it means to live by faith. And faith does good works. Good works necessarily flow out of this faith in Jesus, and which is why at this time of year especially we bring him our best, as the hymn says. We bring him incense, gold, and myrrh. Come, peasant king, to own him, and we'll throw in humbug Scrooge and Tiny Tim and Fezziwig there too, to enthrone him with joy.
Because Christ is born.
Amen.
We hope you enjoyed this special presentation from the Lutheran Hour. Assignment Christmas was adapted by Andrea Vasillo and based on an original essay written by the Reverend Dr. Travis Scholl. Assignment Christmas was produced by Jim Aaron and Dean Evans, directed by Christy Bond, and features the voices of Christine Holloway, Dee Smith, R.M. Hubbard, Autumn Teague, Chris Mackey, and Abby Hogan. A special thanks to hosts the Reverend Doctors Michael Ziegler and Travis Scholl. I'm Mark Eicher. From all of us at the Lutheran Hour, Merry Christmas to you and yours.